Welcome to AuthentiCity FM. I'm Phil Corrali here with my wonderful, well-rested, and Zen-minded co-hosts Mike Sable and Corri Spiegel. Today, we are tackling health and wellness. Now, not the Instagram version, the local government professional version. Question: when did we all become people with dashboards for our bodies? A1Cs, cholesterol, sleep scores. We manage complex budgets and organizations, but our own health? That might be the hard part. Today, we're talking about wake-up calls and what actually works. Hot yoga at 105 degrees, lifting weights and counting steps, running 1,165 days straight while managing type 1 diabetes. Most importantly, we'll talk about why you can't lead your community or really do much of anything if you're running on empty. Let's get started. So this has been an episode we have been talking about doing for quite some time. And it's an opportunity, I think, for us to talk a little bit about the things that we have conversations about more perhaps than we used to, now that we're in the portion of our lives where numbers are part of our regular and daily existence, and things hurt more than they used to, and it's harder to get out of a chair maybe after you've been sitting for a while, and all of those things. And I think it's worth digging into a little bit of the health and wellness of the three of us, certainly, but kind of more broadly, what it's like to try to manage the important parts of one's life when they're also trying to manage a city. Not as easy as one might expect, and certainly requires a great deal of planning, which is kind of wired into our DNA, if I might. So I really don't know where to start with this one, because honestly, there's a lot of different directions for us to go. And I think a couple of ways for us really to start to lean into this is to talk a little bit about what it is that we think health and wellness look like, perhaps some of the things that we think are important that we want to impart on some others. And most importantly, I just want to be able to throw it to Mike Sable first, because I feel like Mike gets to always toss it out and he always throws it to Corri. So I don't think that's fair. And I want to be the nice guy for once, for once.
All right,
So
so we
Mike,
no,
I'm
no,
curious. Tell
I
us.
I appreciate that. So you apparently my little pattern has been revealed. That's my joke is to always start with something funny and then turn it over to Corri for something smart. So we all play a role. So I'll try to work against type a little bit. I will say I think this is really important because uh, managers and assistants and people in this profession often have stressful jobs. We clearly work nights, right? Council meetings go into the night. And so it's not uncommon to have a 12, 13, 14-hour day, 1 day a week as part of a council meeting. And so that throws up your sleep schedule. And so it's really important that you get grounded. And so this is health and wellness. And I've talked openly, right? I'm one of the few city managers who is also a registered yoga teacher. I fell into it because there was a studio within a walking distance of my house, and I thought, well, that's interesting. I'll try that. And so, that is my practice. I don't do a whole lot else, but I do have one sort of superpower that I've had um, forever, and that is the ability to fall asleep in any situation. So. Um, 8 hours is sort of like the standard number of hours of sleep that I get. And so I try to balance good sleep schedule, a little bit of movement. And then, also I we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I'll just say that my dad has been roughly the same height and weight since 1959. And so I have good genetics that work sort of in my favor. And so we'll go in there. So now that being said, that's sort of my very fortunate pattern. Corri, let's talk about your health.
See, I felt that one coming. Phil, I think it backfired. It
Sorry.
really did.
Sorry about that. Yeah. I was really hoping for a different outcome.
That's okay. Um, So I was thinking about this today. I actually closed the pool today as we are in the Midwest and we are now into the descent of winter. It was time to close the pool. And so I got 4 hours of beautiful outside time, which is something I don't uh, take take lightly at this point. But when I think back to our presentation at the ICMA conference, there was a question that was asked in our session about knowing what you know now, what would you change then? And so 2 years ago, this time of year, I left the profession. And I left the profession not in good health. I will say that that summer, there was a week where there were 5 different doctor visits with 5 different specialties, trying to figure out how to keep me upright. And that is not something I look back on with pride, because it should never have gotten to that point. But it did, and it's taken more than 2 years to recover. And so I think we will all talk about kind of how we track our metrics. I think everybody knows we like measuring things. But I've had my Fitbit since 2018. And the first spike in my life was actually during COVID. And 2020 in the profession, COVID was the easy part. We had civil unrest. We had a little girl go missing and ultimately who was murdered. We had a derecho. And in December of that year, I got COVID for the first time because I was not yet eligible for the vaccine because I was like group 3C or whatever it was. And overnight, my resting heart rate jumped 8 points. And so I have been very attached to my Fitbit ever since. And so there is a similar trajectory that happens in 2023. There is a lovely dip in the summer when I spent 2 weeks in the Mediterranean. I think that place is magical for me. And it spiked right back up when I got back. And so for me, health has become something that is super important. Both of my grandparents on my dad's side passed of heart attacks. Heart issues are the family business on both sides of my family. And so being extra aware of taking care of my heart, and that means rest, that means meditation, that means walking the dogs every day. And so I'll give one bit of context before I throw it back to the floor is if I could go back 2 years and knowing what I know now, I would have set much stricter boundaries on my time away from the office. I can't count the number of times I spent a dog walk on a phone with an elected official who didn't have a crisis, but had a relationship conflict that I was supposed to somehow resolve for them while I was walking my dog. And what I would offer to our listeners is when you're not in the office, if it's not urgent and it's not important, it can wait.
I think the "it can wait" part is, in our business, probably one of the most repeated and least followed bits of advice that I hear and give. And I would tell you, your experience is likely far more typical than it should be. And I think that's something that we, as a profession, to some degree, just accept as the way it is. We are busy people. We are focused in a lot of areas. We are on all the time. And the most important thing is to always be available and to always be right at hand. And I will tell you, one of my struggles as a person who lives with type 1 diabetes and as a person generally is that I feel incredibly connected to this little piece of technology that before 2008 I never had. And I do dream about the days of the pre-smartphone era where it wasn't my constant companion and friend. I will tell you from my own health and wellness journey. Um, there are many times where I have not advocated for myself first. As a person who has diabetes, and some people may understand it or may not, I will say I'm a type 1 diabetic. which is different than a type 2 diabetic. It doesn't make type 1 or type 2 better or worse than the other. They're just different. They're not the same. Mine happens to be the type of diabetes that's much less typical in the United States. There are about 1.8 million of us. And essentially, it is an autoimmune disease, and my pancreas does not produce insulin. So I am dependent upon insulin 100% of my life, which seems like not that big of a deal, except for the fact that it's an incredibly huge deal, and part of every waking moment and, frankly, sleeping moment of my life. So the problem with that is that I have a tremendous dependence upon technology. I have a tremendous opportunity to use technology to help manage this disease. But that technology requires that this little dealy bob is with me all the time. Um, so I can't hide from work emails, and I can't hide from social media, and I can't hide from any of those things because I can't be away from my phone, because my phone manages my continuous glucose monitor, which ties into my insulin pump, which gives me insulin to make sure that my blood sugars are regulated in such a way that I don't die. And I don't say that to be glib, but I almost have to laugh about how close to death I am most days. And when you tie that into a job like we have, I have found myself apologizing to people for low blood sugar episodes, for feeling like crap because my blood sugar is sky high and I can't get it down. And those situations tie back into what you were talking about, Corri, which is we're not really great at saying, I need a minute. I need something for myself for right now in order to be capable of doing the things that I need to do, but I can't do those things right now. In my case, when my blood sugar is low, and I had a low blood sugar episode maybe about an hour and a half ago, where a typical blood sugar reading is, 80 to 100. You guys are both probably in that zone right now. Mine right now, according to my trusty watch, is 194. It's a little high, but it was 42 an hour and a half ago. And I will tell you, when my blood sugar is at 42, I barely know my name. And I have been in board meetings where I'm sitting behind the dais presenting on something, and my blood sugar is in the 50s. And I'm like, I can't stop because I'm the village manager and that's my job. I have to present. And I've apologized to my elected officials afterwards who are like, I didn't even realize you were going through that. Why didn't you just stop? But I said, well, couldn't do. I can't stop. Like that's I got to figure it out, right? Why do we do that? Why do we put ourselves into positions where we don't advocate for our own health? I think we're wired that way, and it's not good. It's not ideal, and it's something that I work on a lot as I manage this on a daily basis.
So that reminds me, several years ago now, I had my gallbladder removed. But before you actually have the removal, you go through a series of attacks. And I remember at one point, like I'd seen the surgeon, he's like, "Yep, you should get it removed." But of course, I can manage through this. I don't need to do that. And I had a really bad attack some weekday. It wasn't a council night. I remember that. And so I was literally laying on my office floor. I had thrown up, fortunately in the waste can, because as a mom, you manage that stuff. And I remember vividly, and she would be okay with me telling the story, but my executive assistant at the time comes in and I'm sweating and it's just a mess. And she's like, I'm going to call 911. And I'm like, the fire department is not responding. I will fire you if you call 911, because I was so afraid of being seen by anyone other than like those handful of people that you let into your space. And so she's like, okay, but you're going to the hospital. Like, you can have someone drive you. if you don't want the ambo ride, but you're going. And so we agreed on those terms. And ultimately I went and got my morphine and was very happy that night. And then scheduled my surgery a few weeks later. So, yep, been there, done that.
All right. So I'm going to stop everybody and just say, thank you for sharing real hard stories. Because there are other people who listen to this podcast, or there are other people that we know that don't talk openly about what it's like to have an issue in a moment where you need some help. And there's this really high bar of expectations that we put on ourselves, and no one else has this level of expectation of us. Literally no one. But we're the boss. We're in charge. We're important. And so we hold ourselves to this much higher standard. And I am super fortunate that I have not had to have either one of those situations. But to hear you both talk about it is really powerful. So Phil, talk to me. So I don't know a lot about type 1 diabetes. I should probably know more. So when your blood sugar is low, what do you have to do?
So I think the misconception about diabetes, because it's an oft joked about disease. The number of times people have joked about the fact that they're eating a Snickers bar or drinking a macchiato from Starbucks and how they're giving themselves diabetes, frequently makes me scream quietly in my brain. So blood sugar is a weird thing, and it's essentially your body using energy to power itself. And so you get energy from carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are not just sugar, as we all know. They come in many different forms. And so the simplest way to define it is when your blood sugar is low, you have too much insulin in your system and not enough carbohydrates. And so you've all felt that. When you're hungry, you haven't had breakfast, or you have been, you worked through lunch and it's the late afternoon and you just kind of feel a little queasy and weary, your blood sugar is probably a little dipped at that point. In that case, a non-diabetic's blood sugar may be in the upper 70s, and that feels, you don't feel well. When that's true for me, it's because there's too much insulin coursing into my body from my insulin pump, which means I have to counterbalance it by eating something. So people ask me all the time, "Hey Phil, why do you wear a blazer everywhere you go? Why do you always have a suit coat on? Why are you?"
Because you have good fashion sense.
Well, it helps, but it's because I need extra pockets. I need places to store stuff. And there are days where I think about getting a a man purse, just to bring stuff along with me. But I don't leave anywhere without fruit snacks in my pockets, because I never know when my blood sugar is going to drop. And if I am in a situation where my blood sugar is uncontrollably falling, that's the most dangerous place for me to be. High blood sugar is not great, but it is not great in the long term. Low blood sugar is not great, but it is particularly dangerous and deadly in the short term. So if my blood sugar were to continue to fall, I could pass out. I could go into, in the worst scenarios, a coma and die. And I think part of, when people joke about insulin being a thing and, oh, you better take some more insulin. Oh, insulin this. Insulin is a deadly, deadly hormone that I have to administer every day, with a hope and a prayer and a little bit of science. If I asked you how many carbohydrates were in the meal that you just ate, you wouldn't know. Most of the time, I don't either, but I have to give myself enough insulin to keep my blood sugar from doing this or doing this and staying as close to this as possible. And I'll tell you, it's a hell of a lot harder than it sounds, even with amazing technology. So, the simple fact of the matter is I am aware of my bodily functions every waking hour of the day. And it is for lack of a better term, unbelievably exhausting in most circumstances, because you are constantly aware of something that you shouldn't be aware of. There's a reason we don't have digital readouts in our brains telling us our blood pressure because the more you're aware of it, the more you're aware of it. And the more you're freaking out about it. If it's high, if it's low, if it's medium, if it's not doing what it's supposed to do. And it never does. Blood sugar, I will tell you, never does what it's supposed to. And so in these moments, when I'm in a council meeting, when I'm sitting in a staff meeting, um, my team has started to understand when something's not right. Because if my blood sugar is low, I will just sweat like crazy because my body's going into shock, folks. My body is trying to keep itself alive. And, it just literally pours off my face, and people will like slide a Snickers bar across the table or quietly do it in a really thoughtful, meaningful way. But I'll say, the times that it's the most complicated are when my children realize it and they come in, and I, if my blood sugar is low, I don't have real good control of my emotions. And so I can get very angry, or very sad or very something, seldom happy. But my kids will figure it out before I do. And they will walk over to me and they will put fruit snacks on my leg, or they will say, "Are you okay? Are you fine?" And I'll never forget the first time I was out running with a running stroller with my oldest, and I said, "I have to stop because my blood sugar is low and I can't go any further." And she just like looked up to me and said, "It's going to be okay. I'm here with you." And um, I don't like help. um, and I have to accept it with this disease. So when your children reach over and say, I know it's hard, but it's going to be okay," the world's pointed in the right direction, at least for that moment.
Can we dig in just, and I know this from our conversations, but type 2 diabetes, typically adult onset, sometimes hereditary, more often lifestyle. Absolute issue in our nation, based on diet and exercise as we live the lives we live. But type 1 diabetes is typically diagnosed during childhood, but not always.
So yes is the simple answer to your question, and not always is the more important modifier to it, because at this point, 50% of type 1 diabetics have been diagnosed in adulthood. And there are genetic reasons for people. I don't have any genetic predisposition that I know of. Admittedly, my family history is a little bit muddled because my parents both immigrated to the United States, and I don't have a lengthy family history to look back to. But I was diagnosed when I was 26, and it came out of left field. So it is more typical than it once was. It used to be called juvenile diabetes. Type 1 was called juvenile because typically matriculated between 6 months and 4 years of age. I can't imagine what it must be like for a child to manage through it, or worse still, for the parents to manage through it. I have good friends who are parents of young children with diabetes who frequently sleep no more than 2 hours at a time in any night because they're constantly attached to their phone watching where that blood sugar is moving. And it's, the technology makes it so much easier and so much safer, but it's still an enigma. And it's not predictable. It doesn't do the things that it's supposed to do all the time. Sometimes it does all the things in the way that it always does. And then you'll do the same thing and it won't work. And so there's been some research. I remember when I was diagnosed talking to the doctors, and they were saying, we don't understand, something's going on. You're the fifth male in their 20s who we've diagnosed in the last 2 months. We don't know what it is. And there's been some research. There's a lot of question and answer as to whether there's some sort of biological trigger or something. But all I know is I have it and I deal with it. And that's the only option, because the alternative is not an alternative. All right. I've been talking way,
No,
way
no,
too
no.
much.
So
Way too much.
this is actually a really important thing. And so there's a number of questions that I have that I want to ask. So it's they're jumbled, and I didn't do any show prep, so like you guys know that this is to be expected. Um, so you talked about being tethered to your phone, and Corri, you've mentioned like this collection of data that you've had over the course of a number of years. Um, I'll pick on Corri first because you're next to my sort of screen here, but like, so what does it mean to have this record of numbers, this record of information, and this reliance on a device? What are some of the benefits and what are some of the like negatives behind both of those things? Because I know I wear nothing. I couldn't tell you my heart rate. Like I don't know any of this stuff because I don't do any of these things. So I'm curious, what are some of the pros? What are some of the cons? And how do you view this reliance on technology?
Well, my view is evolving, I think, is the beginning answer. But so I mentioned 2018 is the first data I have, and I have worn my Fitbit every day since. I think I've replaced it 3 times because I'm now attached, right? I've created this set of records, and I want to know, especially as I've aged. I started my early 40s, life looked and felt much different. As I near 50, my obsession with my sleep score and the quality of my sleep is fascinating and probably needs therapy. But so I talked about my resting heart rate. That one is one I watch probably as closely as my blood pressure because they really work in tandem for me. But the other one is, you mentioned loving sleep. I love sleep. I grew up on a farm. I got up at 5 a.m. every day of my childhood. I am making up for lost time. I am also a single mom. So there are big chunks of my 30s into 40s where I didn't get a lot of sleep because that's just not how little kids work. And so now I've become very fixated on where is that sweet spot. And for me, it's 7.5 hours of actual sleep time. So I will probably sleep for 9 hours. And I've learned over time that, deep sleep and REM are the two things you watch for in your sleep score. I function fine on low REM. If I have a lot of REM sleep, so a normal night for me is an hour and a half of REM, hour and a half of deep, and then the rest is light sleep. If I get low REM, it just means I didn't have any weird dreams, which we should talk about dreams because in highly stressed times, I don't remember anything. When I am very calm and very happy and very grounded, I have the most awesome, crazy dreams. They're never scary. They're just weird. And that's how I know my brain is in a really good spot. So that for me has become something I've tracked too. But deep sleep, and specifically coming back from Tampa, I was getting maybe a half hour a night. That's really bad for me. Like me on a half hour of deep sleep fills blood sugar at 90. Like it's not great. And so I need to get back to an hour and a half. And so that's what I really focus on is, do I need to meditate before bedtime? No screens, all these kinds of things. And yesterday, of all days, conveniently, so a couple years ago, Google bought Fitbit. And now AI, Fitbit asked me if I wanted to upgrade the app and be a beta tester for the new AI integration. And so now, like, I can talk to my Gemini coach. I have a Gemini coach now about my sleep was great last night. I did great walking. And it noticed, and I sent Phil a screenshot this morning, it noticed that when I go to bed earlier, like, and we're talking 15, 20 minutes earlier, I get like an extra half hour of deep sleep. So my deep sleep has everything to do with when I went to bed. I didn't know that until this morning, which I thought was crazy. And so for me, those are the little things and where it's evolving. And before we started recording, we had talked about switching costs. When you've started in 2018 and Google's not making the version of the Fitbit I have anymore, now I'm at this point of, do I get a version of Fitbit I don't like? Do I go to Google Pixel? Do I throw it all away and go to Samsung? Like, the switching costs are really big decisions right now. But I think as AI is infused into these programs, yes, there's a lot of security and a lot of privacy and a lot of things that we need to think about. But the idea of the fact that Gemini told me this morning, if I go to bed earlier, I will sleep better based on 8 years of data. I'm like, okay, well, that's good advice. Thanks. Check.
Apple makes a great product, just so you know.
Switching costs, not in.
So before we switch on to that, I mean, I do want to go back to this concept of switching costs because it actually applies in our jobs too, right? You've got enterprise software, you've got right Civic Plus websites. There's a lot of things that you lose when you switch. So we'll come back to it. Phil, tethered to technology.
Tethered. Yeah. Well, so I am tethered to varieties of technology. So all of my blood sugar readings are tracked every 5 minutes, around the clock, as long as I'm wearing tech. And so all of that information automatically dumps to my endocrinologist. So when I am going to the doc, and I go to the endocrinologist 4 times a year, every quarter, it's a solid check-in, and I have an amazing doctor at the University of Chicago. I am incredibly blessed to have the medical team that supports me. But it's fascinating, guys. I will tell you, I can hyper analyze all of my trends, all of my uh, going back through my worst days, trying to understand what happened in those days, or my best days, and trying to understand what happened there. And I sit with my doctor and the dietitian that's in there with us, and we dive into this data, and it's awesome. Except it's overwhelming, and it's so much data that it's paralyzing to some degree. And I have gotten to a place, especially over the last probably couple of years, where I've said, it's too much for me. It's not helping. It's not providing me clarity, because I have to dive back into my memory bank to try to pull out the situations or the scenarios. Because I'll tell you, while I said blood sugar is impacted by carbohydrates, yes, absolutely. But it's also impacted by stress. It's impacted by sleep. It's impacted by protein. It's impacted by exercise. It's impacted by your brain. It's impacted by the sunshine or lack thereof. Like, literally everything impacts it. And so there's no one single thing that you can point to. So I've said this before, like, I almost think that I have too much data. It's too much information to consume and digest and understand. So I have had to step away from it a bit, um, because it literally overwhelms my brain. But now I do love my running technology, and I can't go for a run. It's not a real run if I'm not tracking it, because I like to keep all of those tracked. And so I said in the cold open, right? I'm on day 1,165 of a nonstop running streak. Um, if I if my watch died, I would stop my run, or I would not go running until my watch was charged, so that it's gonna keep that streak alive. Um, and for me, what that does is it's affirmation, right? It's affirmation that I can do it. And I know plenty of type 1 diabetics who are far more capable than I am of doing amazing, unbelievable things. If anybody's a Peloton fan, Robin Arzon, who is one of the Peloton leads, she is a type 1 diabetic. She terrifies me. she runs a marathon because she's bored. She can do virtually anything. And what I say to that is, by me running every day and being able to say that I've run every day because I can look at it and remind myself, that's my affirmation that even with this, I'm capable. I can do it. I can get there. I may not always have the best time doing it, but I am capable. And I think sometimes that's helpful when we think about it in a work context too, right? When we're looking at data, or we're looking at something that's tracked something over time, and we can see those trends, and we can say, I was talking about this with my public works director today. We deployed water listening devices across our entire distribution system to find leaks. Well, guess what? We have reduced the overall water loss by 50%. And that may not feel like much because you can't see it anywhere, but it's certainly meaningful, because now we're not producing more water at our water plant than we need because it's not getting lost in the system, right? So data is helpful. The data is encouraging. Data is giving you the affirmation that the thing that you're trying to do works. So it's, I look at that with my Nike Plus running app. Everybody's moved to Strava. Everybody's moved to something else except me. I am the lone old man holdout, still using the same thing I've been using since 2008.
So I'm going to say two things. So one, your water story was terrific. So I used to work for the city of Bloomington in Minnesota. Uh, Incredible water supply. Really, like they participate in sort of like the best tasting water contests around.
Yeah.
And so my friend Mike Peterson, who just had baby number 2, he and his wife Chelsea, who are amazing, just both amazing people. He was this, like, I went to visit him at the Public Works building, and he was sort of excited about something. I was like, what's going on? And he says, we have predictive analytics that we can predict the next failure. And this is
Yes.
a guy who literally, he makes water. That's his job. And it was so excited about like predicted. And so they predicted the next failure in the line, watched it, and it failed, of course. And then they were able to fix it almost in record time. And so there is a really cool opportunity to talk about sort of data and how we can work. The second thing I'm going to say is this moment of like, and we've talked about this in previous episodes. We're really good at like turning the crank, but we never are very good at like stepping back and seeing if there's a different way to look at something. And that deliberate pause to say, is there a better way? Is there something different? And building systems in our own work to call out time and pause and say, what are we trying to accomplish here? We have to build those into your work life. And that's part of the HPO model that I talk about relentlessly. But what I really want to ask is, Phil, uh, some 1,000, some 100 number of days, how many miles is that that you've worked, that you've run? Uh, Keeping in mind, I don't run around the block, so I'm always going to be impressed by any number you give me.
So I've run now a little more than 3 years in a row straight. The average about 1,600 miles a year when I'm running every day. And if you go all the way, the reason I can't walk away from Nike Plus is it's tracking me all the way back to when I first started running again, which was when I met my now wife. And I was trying to impress her. So she was a runner. So I was like, well, I could do that. I used to do that. I used to run in high school. And so September of '08, she and I were not dating. She's like, hey, I need new running shoes. I'm like, I do too. Let's go get new running shoes. And I bought new running shoes. And the guy was like, hey, there's this really cool new tool called Nike Plus, and you put this little dial thing in your shoe and it tracks how far you've run. You should do that. And then it ties into your iPod. And so while you're listening to music, it's telling you how far you've gone. I'm like, this is like Jetson stuff. This is amazing. Since September of 2008, I have used Nike Plus because it's tracked me, and I'm at 17,792 miles since September of 2008. Now, there have been years where I have run more and less, but the last 3.25 years have been nonstop. And I love the number. It's kind of fun to be able to see.
All right. So I do, for folks who know me very well, I peaked in like third grade for math. So I could add, subtract, multiply, and divide. And so that's about my upper boundary of math skills. Um, I know that the earth is about 25,000 miles around. Um, you've gone like 2/3 around the world. That's incredible.
In like 17 years, 16 years. But yes, it's been a
I,
long,
I have walked
it's,
from I have walked from here to the grocery store in my adult life.
well, when I first met Mike, I thought you were a runner.
We
I
we
remember
we actually
asking you that question.
we had this conversation, and I
Yes.
remember laughing out loud
Yep.
that
Yep.
someone would think I was a runner.
I'm like, Mike, you look like you run all the time. You're built like a runner. And he's like, yeah.
Nope.
And that, interestingly, and maybe we could talk a little bit about this, because I do think we don't talk enough about yoga and how you do that. But that was when you said, yeah, I do yoga. And I was like, I do that every so often. I should do that more. Why do you do it, Mike? Why do yoga? Not just because it was convenient and down the street from your house.
So I got into yoga because, right, it actually was convenient to my house. But there's just something about having those, and this is I have told the woman who owns the studio where I work out, that I do yoga at. We build lots of communities, right? And so those third places that feel like home is what the studio is like for me. So I can walk in there, and I am coming up on, in this particular studio, I'm coming up on my 500th class. Uh, which is a lot of things. Like, I have
It's
been there.
amazing. Yes.
It feels like a long time. I've been there probably 3 or 4 thousand hours of my life has been spent in that room. And I have practiced in every single spot. There's 48 spots in the studio, and I know I have been in each spot. And I do a practice. It's a Baptiste yoga practice. So feel free to Google that for folks. Uh, it is the same sequence every single time. And as someone who makes no plans, who just does things on a whim, it is the one place where there is a consistency and a practice. And so I know where I am in every single moment. I know the next pose that's coming in. And what I think have found the most valuable part of yoga is when you're in a practice and you're doing something hard, your brain is telling you to get out of this thing, right? I want to get out. But your body is always more comfortable than your mind. And so the practice is to calm your mind to stay in it when it's hard. And so, right, we there's this, like, chair pose is one of these poses that just drives me crazy. And there's this bit where you do this twisting chair, twisting chair, and your thighs are just burning, and I just want it to end. And then the instructor, Lindsay Grab, is the owner of the studio, and she'll always say, stay in it. It's worth it to the end. And there's this piece about staying with it when there's value in what you're doing. It's more mental than it is physical. And so for me, that is the kind of the thing that I need more than anything, because I'm very quick to jump from this thing to that thing and move on, especially at work. But to know that you're rooted and you're grounded in it. And I'll bore you with one other story, which is like this. When you go through the teacher training for yoga, they talk about the ethical practices of yoga. And I have been tinkering with this idea that I think the ethical practices of yoga and the ICMA code of ethics are actually aligned perfectly. And so it's for me, it's both quasi spiritual, emotional, but also professional. And so for me, it becomes a place where I can be a whole person, grounded in what's real, doing what's hard, in a way that's actually fulfilling in my soul. So that's why I do it. I did not plan on saying any of that, by the way.
But you also bring it with you. I
Yeah.
can vividly remember so many board meetings where, again, you're a pretty active guy and sitting for 8 hours makes everyone antsy, but you in particular. And so you would like walk up from your chair, walk back to the wall, and start like just normal people would call it stretching. But you would be going through different yoga things. And I suspect it was also grounding your mind in that moment, even though that might not have been what you said you were doing.
Well, I think your statement of I had to write it down because I knew I would forget it, but calming your mind to stay in it when it's hard. City Management 101. How do you and to tie it to what you just said, right? How do you maintain your ability to get through those moments, right? Those difficult times when the decisions are not clear, when the expectations are outrageous, and no matter what you do, it may not be right, but you have to maintain that level of level-headedness that people will turn to you and say, well, the city manager's here, so it's going to be okay, right? So, and you lean into it. It hurts, right? You're in chair pose for 8 hours in closed session trying to come up with a plan, and you do it, right? So I'm going to write that down and keep it on my desk. That's a great line. That's a great line.
So one of the things, the other thing I really love about it is we practice breathing. It's the single most important thing we do every day. You stop breathing, we know the outcome. And so, how do you recenter your breath when it's shallow, or like when that pressure and the stress is real? And so, when you get that really uncomfortable that really uncomfortable question from a council member that you know is maybe a setup for the next round of questions, and they want you to react or they want you to sort of go on a different direction. How do you stay grounded without it being super obvious? And so breath technique is a really important thing. If you are at the ICMA conference, you probably saw Amy Cuddy talk about sort of this box breathing or these other techniques. They really do actually matter. And so it's one of those things that I will consciously practice, especially during this is labor negotiation season for us. And so, um, you're in a meeting. My goal in every sort of stressful meeting is to have 5 breaths per minute. It's a quirky little thing, but right, you breathe in, you pause, you breathe out, and you pause, and it's 4 seconds in, pause, 6 seconds out, pause. That's 12 seconds, 5 breaths a minute. If you can get your body to sort of regulate that sort of rhythm, it's amazing what that does to how you respond. Like you can just absorb anything and respond in a way that's calm. And so part of me, like I as I coming up on my 500th class, is I am practicing just that sequence of breath, even when it's hot, because it is. And I don't do hot yoga. I will say I do heated. Uh, and so we do it at like 94, 95 degrees. Uh,
Woof.
so if you're ever in Minneapolis and you want to join me, well, open invitation to any listener. I've got free guest passes for everybody. Let's go.
I used to do yoga more regularly, and when I moved to Glencoe, so this is going back a ways. My Before we moved, Lindsay, my wife, and I used to do it probably 2 times a week. We had this little dinky yoga studio in our neighborhood, and I liked it because it was small, and I didn't embarrass myself too much in front of people. And then I went to a core power yoga class. And it was harder because there were 60 people in there, and I was just like, I really don't want to hang out with all of you people because I don't think I'm very good at this. But it's I feel like I need to do it again because there was a uniqueness for me, because we'll talk about this, I'm sure. I'm a terrible sleeper. I mean, on my best days I sleep badly, on my worst days I barely sleep. there were times at the end of a yoga class where I would be asleep at the end of the class on the ground, on the mat. And you get to this place of calm that my body is just generally not predisposed to be. And I remember I would wake up and be like, I feel absolutely amazing. And I don't say that nearly ever. And as you talk about it, I'm remembering those spaces that I would be in and how unique it is to be in a space of just being content. And I feel like that's something that happens in yoga classes, particularly when you practice well. But um, you're inspiring me to think about it again. Get over my anxiety of being around people.
So while you're doing the whole Zen yoga thing, I can't shut my brain off. I have tried. The breathing thing is definitely something I've worked on and gotten very good with, but I just can't turn my brain off. And so I spent 2 to 3 years doing virtual boxing when the Oculus first came out. And so
Yeah.
my version was like pounding at air in my living room, which is probably great if there are videos. But that was my thing, right? Like I had to get the energy out a different way. I had to go up instead of down.
So I think this is probably like one of these moments of invitation for our listeners is like, so Corey did air boxing and Phil does running and I do yoga. You have to sort of explore the world about what's out there because you can do any number of things. But the real value is we have sort of spent time and a little bit of age and a little bit of wisdom of finding these things that actually help us be better at the job. Because the job will consume you if you let it. The demands will consume you if you let them. And so I actually got a text last weekend. I got a text from my council member who actually started the text message. It was, I'm sorry to bug you on a Sunday. Uh, that would have not happened in any other place I'd worked. It would have been, I need this thing on a Sunday. And so, uh, cultivating those boundaries, cultivating that, level of respect for your own space and time is something that I think young managers will really struggle with because Phil, you talked about it earlier, right? You're always on, but there
Mhm.
is a moment where my being off makes me better at the job. Corey, I don't know if you want to respond to that a little
I
bit, or Phil.
I think, and so to lean it in, it doesn't matter what stage of your career you're at because everything will feel important and urgent if you let it. And it doesn't, this profession or any other one, it's just true. And so I think having the confidence in yourself to have the courageous conversation, because as I started to set more boundaries, I'm like, I don't get many hours a day with my child. And so there are a couple where kind of that's sacred time. And I hope you can respect that. And bar none, all of them understood that and respected it. They're like, yeah, life is short. You have every right to set that boundary. And so I think people are much more willing to understand when you're sincere and authentic about why the boundary exists. And not that you should ever have to explain yourself, but I think it creates that humanity connection between people to say, you know what, you know, I've had employees when you say goodbye to a pet, we all face these things in life. Don't come back to work. Like there are moments where you should go be yourself in whatever version that is. And for managers, most councils, not all of them, but most people are really great people. They get into public service for all the right reasons and will understand when you say, you know, Phil, you're going on vacation this week. Is it the happiest place on earth or the most magical place on earth? It's
The
one of
most
them.
magical. The
Yeah.
most magical.
And so the idea that you're going to go spend time with your family at the most magical place on earth, that should be a little sacred. And you should have a team that can handle it while you're gone. And everyone should understand that unless it's actually a real emergency, that it actually can wait.
I think your point is exactly right, and I think it needs to be something that people say out loud, which is, "This is what I need to do," right? I need this for my family, for myself, for whatever. And I will tell you, I am blessed to work with some of the most um, thoughtful and considerate and caring elected officials in this community. And every board that I've had, and I've had, I think this is my eighth board that I'm working with since I've been manager, has been totally supportive of me taking time and me not being there, because they know that I'm there a lot, and they know that I'm in it, and they also know how much my family means to me, because I'm not afraid to talk about that, right? I love talking about my kids. I love talking about the things that my wife is doing, and I have that conversation. I was thinking about a little bit of what we heard from Arthur Brooks at ICMA, which is, when you put two people in a room who hate each other, but you ask them a question that you know they both have something in common. Talk to me about your kids. What are your kids doing? And both of those individuals are able to kind of gloat or just, you know, dote on their family for a minute. They realize they have some things in common. And I love hearing about my elected officials' kids and grandchildren and what they're doing and how, and they want to hear about mine. And we build this understanding for each other that I will be here when you need me. And when I'm off, I will be here if you absolutely need me. But we have a really great staff who's going to back me up while I'm away. And I think that authentic conversation about what it is to be a human and a manager in a community that has expectations of you is important, because you want your board to recognize why it is you are who you are, right? We're not singular creatures. Our jobs are a lot, but they're not the only thing. When my elected officials say to me, "Are you taking care of yourself? Are you okay? Do you need me to do something?" And I'm always like, "No, no, I'm fine. I'm fine." But to hear them say it changes the dynamic. It's not me, the manager, them, the elected official. It's two humans saying to each other, "Hey, I care about you," right? And I think we can model that. I also recognize that my experience isn't typical necessarily, but I do think that even with people who are mean-spirited and out for you, that you still can find where some level of commonality um, and humanity that can hopefully uh, blunt some of that difficulty in the hard times when you need it to. I think you can't just expect it's going to happen either. There has to be work done to get there.
So we've talked about generations a little bit, and I think what we're kind of skirting around right now is Gen X behaves a certain way. The boomers had a very traditional environment, which we're kind of breaking up. The millennials are making their own moves, but Gen Z, I think, is going to be much more open. They've grown up with social media. They have the language. We've talked about that on previous episodes. And I think they're going to be much more direct about actually having the conversations.
So I'm sort of been reflecting on this. So my son is incredibly bright and gifted, and uh he has these natural gifts and talents that I see that he doesn't quite see yet. And so I am trying to like cultivate like all of these opportunities that I know I would never have available to me. And so he sort of expressed an interest in sort of mountains and hiking, and I was like, well, cool, let's go to Colorado and try this like we'll go see some schools. And so um I think a couple of things. So one, the window of the world is sort of more open for kids today because maybe we lacked it, and so we want to make sure that they're given that opportunity. But also, they're just more worldly. They know more about themselves. They know more about others. They have this access to feelings that maybe I respect and admire more than probably uh, he'll ever know. And so it's this. If there's an opportunity for me to help cultivate something that can help him grow, I'm all for it, because you're right. These kids today are so special and so different. And so I'm sort of rambling a little bit, but there's this moment of transition, right? It's no longer about what do I need. It is about what does this next generation need, that if I can help do that, I'm going to foster it and develop it a little bit. Because it's just different. It's just, it feels different to me. And that's why we've talked about hope and optimism on this podcast. We talked about it, Corri, in your research, in your doctoral dissertation. This hope and optimism piece is a real thing. And every time I talk to a kid, right, sort of 18 and under, I become more optimistic and more hopeful, because they're better about health. They're better about sort of connection to friends. They're better about their own advocacy for their own needs. And so I don't think city managers 20 years from now are going to struggle with, well, I shouldn't maybe take 2 days off in a row because my council might need me. I don't think that's going to be a problem in 20 years, because they'll have advocated for themselves, and those future electeds will also understand it at a different level. So maybe, just maybe, our work and our struggles have helped make the world just a little bit better.
So there's two things I want to touch on that relate to what you just said. And one relates to my daily running. When I started it, I recognized that the only way it was actually going to happen was if I did it in the morning, first thing. And so that's what I do. I get up early and I go, and then I get ready to go to work. I help the kids get on a bus, and I go to my office. What that means is I arrive at my office 30 minutes after Village Hall opens. This was not an easy thing for me, because my previous experience was that I would arrive at Village Hall 30 minutes before it opened. So what were people going to think if I arrived 30 minutes after Village? Does he not take it seriously that we open at 8 and he's getting here at 8:30? Does he, special rules for the village manager? Oh, isn't he cool? All of those things are certainly things that some people may think. I don't think anybody cares. I'm there an hour to 2 hours after Village Hall closes. I am frequently the last person in the building. It's really fine for me not to be there right at the second that the building opens, but it took me a while to be comfortable with that. And I had conversations with people around why I was doing it. I wanted to be there for my kids. I wanted to be able to get them on the bus. These are times that I'm not going to ever get back again. It's important to me, and I want to do this run every day. And everyone was like, "Yeah, good for you. That's great." And maybe they hated me for it, but again, sometimes you just have to do something that is right for you. It is not in any way a reflection on how much I care about my job that I'm not there. Now, if I have to be there early, I'm there early. That means I get up earlier. I still get my run in. I may not get the kids on the bus that day, but that's okay, right? And I'm there when I need to be there. But most days I say I'm not scheduling anything until 9 o'clock, which gives me 30 minutes before my first meeting to just settle in for the day and do that. That was a hurdle for me. And sometimes you just have to advocate for yourself because you know it's the right thing for you. So that's point number one. Point number two is we should be learning, taking a cue from folks that to some degree we question sometimes, how dedicated are you really? How come you're not checking your email 3 times every hour after 8 p.m. until you go to bed? Because I just sent you something, and how come you're not responding? Gen Z and some of our younger millennials and others are like, yeah, I don't really need to do that. That's how we were until the advent of these stupid things, right? You'd check your email before you left the office, and then you'd never check it again until the next morning. And guess what never happened? The world never came to a crashing halt. It's really okay. And it's really okay to separate yourself from that and to do so thoughtfully and to say, I am going to be available if you need me, but please call me if you need me. If the expectation is that I'm going to have to respond to something, don't rely on me to check my email because it is 9 o'clock and I don't want to do it. I want to watch the next episode of whatever show I'm desperately, awaiting the next episode of. And that's perfectly fine too, because it helps you recharge for the next day. You are allowed to be yourself. You are allowed to have interests and to do things that are outside of your career because it recharges you to go and do the things that you have to do when you're there. And I think if we can thoughtfully dialogue with each other instead of passive aggressively arguing under our breath about, well, Phil doesn't show up until X, so he clearly doesn't care. Instead of saying, hey, you didn't show up today until 8:30. I was trying to find you at 8:15. Like, what's going on? Oh, well, let's talk about that. Let's have you needed me at 8:15. I'm sorry. You know what? Call me next time. I'm happy to answer the phone. I'll be on my way in anyway. Um, we don't have those conversations. And I think those honest conversations are often missing. And I think a big part of why sometimes I'll lay awake at night staring at the ceiling because I'm like, oh, I didn't have that conversation today. Oh, I wonder what's going on. Oh, I wonder maybe I'd sleep better. Um, so this is self-help and a little bit of projection out to the listening groups out there. Have a conversation with somebody if you wonder about what's going on. That's what we should be doing for each other. It's just the right thing.
So there's so many strings I want to pull at. But in this episode, we've talked about adaptive technology. We talked about predicting when the water line's going to break. And Mike, you talked about upcoming labor negotiations. I think we are so much more comfortable with the technology of things than allowing human capital to evolve. Remember pre-COVID when it was like heresy to use your sick time? Like you would come to work really sick and not care. And then like during COVID and after, if somebody had the sniffle, you would look at them and be like, why are you here?
Go home
Like
now.
we had an international pandemic change how we viewed about being sick at work. It took something of that magnitude to change something that in hindsight is like super novel. Like, really? And so think about that from the workplace. So, Phil, you talked about what time you came to work. And, I knew people in my career who were proud that they never used a sick day. And I'm like, well, that means you probably shared your cooties and probably never helped take care of your kids. That's not a badge of honor to me. And so I think we've inherited these human capital systems, which probably were great when they were developed, but are they actually really relevant in 2025 and beyond? And so I think there's got to be a little bit of willingness, not only to have the conversation, but to listen to the feedback of what different could actually look like. Because yes, there are jobs that are 24/7. I get it. And there are hourly things and we have all of these systems that we've built, but I like to break stuff. Some of them have long outlived their useful purpose. And so we should be willing to say goodbye to some of these things for the betterment of service to the future of these communities.
So I'm going to say one thing in response, and I have a friend and colleague who's a manager nearby, and he often we often talk about how City Hall has to be open, uh, and there is literally nothing that we do in City Hall in my City Hall that couldn't be scheduled. And his comment is we're more like a dentist office than we are a Walmart. Like you could schedule what time you're going to come in to get your building permit to do this thing, or you could come in and get your like. And this mindset of like this, we're not a trend. Like we're something that we can actually schedule and be more effective that way than just being permanently on. Just people don't come to City Hall like they used to. They come to City Hall with a purpose. And so why don't we schedule the purpose? And so even this mindset shift of like, oh, we've got to be open in case somebody needs us. If we shifted the mindset to saying, we'll be here when you need us, and you could schedule it. And so, right, early morning contractors love 7 a.m., 6:30 a.m. on a summer because they want to work all day. What if we just scheduled that time for them rather than just making them work 8 to 4:30? It's a total, Corri, you're right. It's a mindset shift that we could actually implement, and we could start to take appointments and actually deliver better service faster to the customer who actually needed us.
I'm pretty sure your contractors would much prefer just to be able to submit pictures and call the app good and not come to City Hall at all.
Mhm.
Um,
If we can get into, we should be doing building inspections via drone and just cameras. We should also just do that too.
it's the technology's there. I'm just
It's
saying, if
coming.
Amazon
It's
can give me my package,
Perfect.
saying
All right. So we have reached almost the end of this program. So Phil, thank you for sharing so purposefully about sort of your own health experiences. Uh, November is a special month for a couple of reasons. The floor is yours. Talk about November.
so November is National Diabetes Awareness Month, and I have been working with an organization called Breakthrough T1D. It used to be called JDRF, which, as I mentioned a while ago, JDRF stood for Juvenile Diabetes Research Fund. Obviously, it's more than just juvenile, but it is the preeminent organization that is doing research to find a cure for type 1 diabetes, particularly. Their focus is on the 1.8 million of us in the United States and the about 8 million of us across the world who have type 1. So, it is an organization I have worked with closely for, gosh, about 12 or 13 years. I have worked hard to try to advocate for this organization, and very unexpectedly was given an award by JDRF this past April called the Passion to Mission Award, which recognizes an individual dedicated to our mission wholeheartedly and through the power of storytelling, use their voice to fundraise for breakthroughs because they know that one day there will be a cure. And those of you who know me know that from the standpoint of my belief around what local government can do, I believe the power of a good story helps to really elevate all of what it is that we're trying to articulate to anybody who's listening. In my circumstance, I have used my storytelling to fundraise. And so in the last 12 or so years, I've raised about $125,000 on behalf of JDRF, or now Breakthrough T1D. And I am fundraising this month, during the month of November. I am what is called a T1D champion. Some of you who follow me on LinkedIn will have seen a video that I posted earlier this week. And I'm going to be doing at least one video a week talking a little bit about life with type 1 diabetes. Is it outside of the comfort zone of a very professionally structured LinkedIn profile? Sure is. And that's the point. Because guess what? We're all human beings, despite the gravitas that we mask ourselves in on the social media platforms, all of them. I am excited to continue to advocate for this organization. It is meaningful to me. I will be wearing blue every day. Blue is the color of diabetes awareness. And so I appreciate that Mike got the memo and Corri got the memo. Corey's even got a blue light, which, I don't have, which I appreciate very much. But people often maybe not pay attention to it. But I wear a breakthrough T1D bracelet along with my medic alert bracelet, just like you saw on daytime TV when you were watching The Price is Right at your grandparents' house in the 80s. Yes, they still make medic alert bracelets, and guess what? They're important. So um, we will post along with this episode the link to my page. It talks a little bit about my story and my diagnosis and how I got to this point now, living with type 1 diabetes for nearly 20 years. 2026 will be my 20th diaversary, as we like to call it, in the parlance of diabetic worlds. And it's really something to think about what it was like then versus what it's like now. I just am grateful for the outreach that I have gotten, the support that I've gotten over the years, but particularly I posted that video on earlier this month on LinkedIn, and I got like 8 or 9 very personal messages from folks talking about their own experiences, either for themselves or somebody that they love, who they have cared for, um, expressing thanks and gratitude for talking about it. It doesn't seem hard to me to talk about because it's who I am. I've never hidden it. If I pass out in front of you, I'm going to need your help. So you should know why. Uh, so it's not something that I'm embarrassed about, but I recognize that that's a bit of my own privilege, and the people that surround me, who are willing to care about it and are willing to recognize that it's who I am, and don't judge me for it. And I know not everybody is that blessed. So I think it's worth folks being aware of. The world being more aware of. And I tell you what, I think a cure is just on the horizon. So thanks everybody for the support and for listening. I certainly don't want to talk about myself this much usually, so it's been a little weird to do that, but I'm grateful that you guys have been so um, curious and conscious of my own struggles with it and willing to think about it and ask questions. It's actually really wonderful when somebody asks a question, as long as the question is, can you really eat that? Because when people ask me that question, you can imagine what I want to say back to them. So yeah, don't ask that question of anybody.
So, like last week when I said, should you be eating that? Were you like cursing me in your head?
No, because I think you came at it with a from a place of a care, as opposed to a person who's coming at it from a place of, I thought you were diabetic. Why are you eating that Snickers bar? Well, you know what? My blood sugar is 52. So if you want to go, let's go, because I'm gonna be pissed at you right now because my mood is not in any place for that conversation to take place. But I mean, I think when I say that, the point is, put yourself into the position of the person who is trying to figure out what they're doing, right? And like anything, we have to have a little bit more grace for what somebody is going through. We don't know the burden that a person is carrying when they walk into a room or when they're doing whatever they're doing. And we have to be careful and thoughtful about the words that we use when even if we're trying to be curious and helpful, that it's our words matter, and the way that we share our words matter as well. So I would just say, I know Corri had only love in her heart as she was asking me that question, and I don't even remember you asking it. So clearly, it didn't make that much of an impact. No offense.
I'm taken.
That's great. That's
Well,
great.
that was really well said, Phil. Thank you.
All I want to say, can I just say one thing? And I know that I've talked way more on this episode than I feel comfortable talking, but um, I want to just make one personal statement that has nothing to do with anything we've talked about, other than it relates to our profession. On November 4th, 1956, which we're recording right now on November 5th, but on November 4th, 1956, both of my parents walked across the border from Hungary into Austria as the border was closing, um, and never reopened until 1989, um, because the Hungarian Revolution was happening, it was failing, and it was a life or death choice that was made with only minutes of preparation. They did so 2 miles apart. They did not know each other. My parents left on the same day and met 5 years, 4.5 years later in Chicago. But they both shared the day that they fled their country and made their way to the United States and built a life. And my dad started on January 3rd, 1957, a 54-year career with the Des Plaines Park District, and made choices, and some of those choices were made for him, that positioned him to be somebody that remains my local government, my most significant local government hero. The reason that I am in this business is because he had the courage to step across a boundary and try something completely unexpected without any plan of how it was going to go. And I am grateful every moment that that day happened, because I otherwise wouldn't be here having this wonderful conversation with the two of you, talking about the profession that I love so very dearly. Um, and I am just grateful that I had the opportunity to grow up as a first generation American in this country, seeing two people who just loved every moment about being American, and they cared as deeply as any person who had been born here. They cared more in many ways, and it instilled in me a passion and love for what we do. And so I just wanted to make mention of the fact that November is an important month to me for a lot of reasons, but that is just another one.
I just got the Mike Sable tingles like multiple times. Like what a story, and I can't even say thank you enough, Phil. Like, you have brought it all today. If there was an authentic episode, this was definitely it on every way, shape, or form. So he mentioned we will drop the link to his fundraiser with all of the socials we do. If you've stuck with us this far, don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you are watching or listening from. And most importantly, for our younger listeners, take care of your health and well-being now. It will be so much easier to maintain than it will be to regain. And you'll just have to trust me on that one.